They were more than machines of war. They were the steel fist of the Allied campaign, rolling across deserts, beaches, forests, and frozen fields on every front of the Second World War. From the sands of North Africa to the hedgerows of Normandy, from the volcanic islands of the Pacific to the frozen Ardennes, American tanks carried the war to the enemy and refused to stop. Some were built for speed, others for firepower. Some were rushed into battle before they were ready, while others arrived just in time to change everything. Together, they formed an armored arsenal that helped decide the outcome of the deadliest conflict in human history. These are every U.S. tank used in World War II. We begin where every ground war begins, with armor. When the United States entered the war in December 1941, it had almost no combat-ready tanks. What followed was one of the greatest industrial mobilizations in history. American factories produced over 88,000 tanks and tank destroyers during the war, more than Germany and Japan combined. Some of those tanks were masterpieces, some were stopgaps, and some were legends that the world has never forgotten. This is every tank that carried the American flag into battle, category by category, generation by generation. Let's start with light tanks. M2A4. The M2A4 was the tank the United States had when the war began. Armed with a single 37mm gun and built for a war that had not yet arrived, it was already outdated before combat started. A handful saw action in the Pacific in the earliest months of the war, but it was really the machine that taught America how to build what came next. M3 Stuart. The first American tank to see serious combat in World War II. Nimble, fast, and armed with a 37mm gun, the Stuart gave Allied forces mobility when they desperately needed it. British crews who received it under Lend-Lease called it the Honey, because compared to what they had been driving, it felt smooth and reliable. Against Japanese armor in the Pacific, it held its own. Against German tanks in North Africa, it needed help. M3A1 Stuart. An improved variant of the original Stuart, the M3A1 added a gyro stabilizer for the gun and a power traverse turret. Small upgrades. But in combat, small upgrades keep crews alive. It served across multiple theaters and remained in the fight long after heavier tanks arrived. M3A3 Stuart. A further refined version with a redesigned hull and better fuel capacity. The M3A3 extended the Stuart's service life and improved its range. Critical in the vast distances of Pacific Island campaigns where logistics were always stretched thin. M5 Stuart. When the engines used in the M3 became needed elsewhere, engineers dropped twin Cadillac V8 car engines into the Stuart chassis and created the M5. Quieter, smoother, and easier to maintain, it was a more refined light tank that continued doing what the Stuart had always done best: reconnaissance, screening, and infantry support. M5A1 Stuart, the final production variant of the Stuart family. By 1944, it was clearly too light for direct tank versus tank combat, but it remained valuable for its speed and was still fighting in Europe and the Pacific on the last day of the war. M22 Locust. Built specifically to be delivered by glider directly onto the battlefield. Small enough to fit inside a transport glider, the Locust was designed for airborne operations, dropping armor from the sky before infantry even hit the ground. It saw limited operational use, but the concept it represented was entirely new. M24 Chaffee. When the Stuart finally ran out of development potential, the Chaffee arrived to replace it. Armed with a 75mm gun and a light tank hull, it outgunned everything in its class. Fast, well-designed, and far more capable than what it replaced, the Chaffee arrived late in the war but proved immediately that American light tank design had finally caught up with the demands of modern combat. Now, medium tanks. Medium tank M2. The M2 was America's medium tank when the war started, and it was nowhere near ready for combat. Built in tiny numbers and used almost entirely for training, it never fired a shot in anger. But its chassis became the foundation for the tanks that followed, making its contribution indirect but essential. M3 Lee. The M3 Lee was a tank born from crisis. After watching Germany destroy French armor in 1940, the US Army needed a medium tank immediately, and it needed one faster than any proper design process allowed. The result was the M3, with its 75mm gun mounted awkwardly in a sponson on the hull rather than a turret. Unusual, underpowered in concept, and already a compromise before it reached the battlefield. But in North Africa in 1942, it gave Allied crews firepower they had not had before, and it fought until something better could replace it. M3 Grant. The British version of the M3 Lee, modified with a lower turret to British specifications. It fought alongside the Lee in North Africa and became famous at the Second Battle of El Alamein. British crews appreciated its gun but not its height. The M3 stood tall on the battlefield, which made it easy to spot and easy to hit. M4 Sherman. The most important American tank of the war, and one of the most important tanks in history. Over 50,000 were built. It fought in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, the Pacific, and Germany. It was not the most powerful tank on any battlefield it crossed. The German Panther outgunned it. The Tiger out-armored it. But the Sherman was reliable, mechanically simple, and available in numbers that the Germans could never match. American crews called it many things. Some called it the Ronson, because it lit up on first strike. But it was also the tank that was there when it mattered, in numbers that eventually overwhelmed everything. M4A1 Sherman. The cast hull variant of the Sherman, with a rounded upper body instead of a welded one. Slightly stronger in places, slightly heavier overall. It saw combat from North Africa onward and remained in production throughout the war. The rounded hull became one of the most recognizable silhouettes of the entire conflict. M4A2 Sherman. A diesel-powered variant of the Sherman, the M4A2 was produced in significant numbers but used primarily for Lend-Lease, sent to the Soviet Union and Britain rather than American units. Soviet tankers received thousands of them and used them extensively on the Eastern Front. M4A3 Sherman. The preferred American variant of the Sherman family, powered by a Ford GAA V8 engine that gave it better performance than earlier versions. It became the standard U.S. Army Sherman in the European theater after 1944 and was the most refined version of the original design. M4A 376 W Sherman. The Sherman with a 76mm high-velocity gun capable of penetrating German armor that the original 75mm could not reliably defeat. The wet ammunition stowage reduced catastrophic fires. It was the Sherman finally given the teeth it had always needed, and it arrived in time for the breakout from Normandy. M4A3E8 Sherman. Easy 8. The best Sherman of the war. Upgraded suspension, the 76mm gun, and improved armor protection combined in a tank that could finally meet German medium tanks with genuine confidence. Crews who got the Easy 8 knew they had something better. It fought through the final campaigns in Germany and went on to serve in Korea. M4A3E2 Sherman Jumbo. When Allied commanders needed tanks that could push through heavily defended positions without being destroyed, the Jumbo was the answer. Extra armor bolted everywhere. On the hull, the turret, the gun mantelet. It was slow. It was heavy. But it could survive hits that would kill a standard Sherman, and it led the way into places where other tanks could not go. Sherman DD. Duplex drive. The amphibious Sherman. A collapsible flotation screen allowed it to swim from landing craft to shore under its own power. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, DD Shermans were supposed to swim ashore ahead of the infantry. Many sank in the rough water before they reached the beach. Those that made it gave the first wave of soldiers on Omaha and Utah something no infantry unit could provide. Armor on the sand from the first minutes of the assault. M4A4 Sherman. The longest-hulled Sherman variant, powered by a Chrysler multi-bank engine that crammed 5 automobile engines together. Complex to maintain and never popular with mechanics. It was used heavily by British and Commonwealth forces and by Free French units, but rarely by American armored divisions who preferred the M4A3. Now, heavy tanks. Heavy Tank M6. America's attempt at a true heavy tank. Heavily armored, massively gunned, and completely impractical. It weighed 57 tons, was too heavy for most bridges, and only 40 were ever built. It never reached combat. Army commanders decided the resources were better spent building more Shermans. The M6 spent the war improving grounds and depots, a reminder that bigger is not always better. M26 Pershing. The tank that America should have built sooner. Armed with a 90mm gun and protected by armor thick enough to finally stand up to German heavy tanks, the Pershing was the answer to the Tiger and the Panther that Sherman crews had been waiting for since 1942. It arrived in Europe in February 1945, just months before the war ended. In those final weeks, it destroyed Tigers, crossed the Rhine, and proved everything its advocates had argued for years. It came too late to change the war, but it changed everything that came after. Now, tank destroyers. M10 Wolverine. Built on a Sherman hull with an open-top turret and a 3-inch gun, the M10 was the U.S. Army's primary tank destroyer in the early campaigns. Fast and well-armed, it was designed to ambush enemy armor rather than fight it head-on. Its open turret left crews exposed to artillery and small arms, but the gun could handle most German tanks it encountered in 1942 and 1943. M18 Hellcat. The fastest armored fighting vehicle of the entire war, 60 miles per hour on a good road. The Hellcat was built around one philosophy: speed is armor. It did not try to absorb hits. It tried to avoid them, move faster than the enemy could track, and kill from unexpected angles. Armed with a 76mm gun, it was lethal when used correctly, and the crews who understood its doctrine used it brilliantly. M36 Jackson. When the M10's 3-inch gun proved insufficient against the front armor of German Panthers and Tigers, the M36 arrived with a 90mm gun that could. The Jackson became the most capable American tank destroyer of the war, able to destroy any German vehicle it encountered at combat ranges. It arrived in the European theater in late 1944 and immediately became the most valued anti-armor asset in American armored units. Now, special and experimental tanks. T-14 assault tank. A joint American-British project to create a heavily armored infantry support tank, the T-14 was built and tested but never entered production. The British ultimately chose not to proceed with it, and only 2 prototypes were completed. It represents one of the roads not taken in Allied armor development. Medium tank T-20, a prototype that led directly to the M26 Pershing. The T-20 was tested extensively and showed that American engineers understood what a better tank needed to look like. Its development was delayed by institutional resistance and production priorities that kept the Sherman dominant for too long. T-28 Super Heavy Tank. With armor up to 12 inches thick and weighing 95 tons, the T-28 was designed for one purpose: breaching the Siegfried Line and other heavily fortified positions. It had no turret. It barely moved. Only 2 were ever built, and the war ended before it could be used. One was later found abandoned in a field in 1974, forgotten for nearly 3 decades.